a good background, or is there like some weird line?
No, this is your background's better than mine. I'm sitting in the middle of my living room. So you're in Laguna. What's the story in Laguna riding wise? Like can you ride over in Aliso and Woods?
Strictly speaking, you're not supposed to go in the parks, but the city only closed the parking lots and the entrances. So
Mm-hmm.
you can still get from other towns or from other ways into the parks. So once you're riding there, it's actually not illegal and it's okay. But it keeps the masses out. You know, I think the people who always go to these hills, they know how to do it, and it keeps the masses out because it gotten a bit crazy there for a while. You know, a lot of people looked at it like a vacation and go like, hey, let's go to the beach, let's go to Laguna, and the hiking trails on top of the world. It was like, it looked like Main Street in Santa Monica, you know, it was like completely busy with people. And that's why they put this temporary closure in place.
So Laguna, home of the Laguna Rads, like Wednesday night rides, have they been pretty much called off recently?
Yeah, completely. It's never happened. I mean, we hardly ever skipped a Wednesday night ride in 35, nearly 40 years. I mean, every
Wow.
once in a great while when there was a fire or a really, really, really bad rainstorm or something. But it hasn't happened in the last month at least. And people keeping their distance. I think a few people go on rides together, one or two people, hopefully not more. It's a different kind of thing, but at the same time, I often go ride by myself when I'm at home. Some things haven't really changed that much for me. And I've been really busy with not only creating new content, but also I was lucky enough to go on a few really cool big trips before all this started. And I have a lot of materials to go through. And I have a lot of my old materials from past trips. You know, I have a whole library of stuff. So I'm not getting bored yet.
Yeah, I just nerded out on your 9 bikes challenge that you did in your yard. I guess you've always got your yard to ride. That was actually, at least in the span of your career, that's relatively recent that you sort of set up the trials course in the front yard. That was Tom Sherman that put that in, right?
Yeah, I've been bugging him for years, and 5 years later, he finally called me one day and said, "Hey, I'm digging at this site, and we have all these rocks." And I said, "Bring them over." And they came with this flatbed truck, and I had to decide like within minutes, because some of those rocks are the size of an office desk. And once you put them down, you don't move them anymore. And I had to kind of place them at the right time, so I have enough options and don't ruin my garden at the same time, and have the right side up and all that, the right angles. But it was cool, and it's a good thing to have. And yeah, and the 9 bike challenge was like, you know, I have a garage full of bikes, and I thought it would be fun to kind of put most of them in use. I could have had a few more bikes, but I didn't have the energy to ride much longer.
And well, I mean, it finished on that Zaskar. Is that one that like you've like been keep holding on to for all these years? What's the story with that particular bike?
I have a few bikes I've been holding on, and this is one of the classic ones from the 93, 94 era with this classic color and the spin wheels. And honestly, there was a point when I think I had sold this bike to a friend of mine. And then like 10 or so years later, he gave it back to me. He was like saying, every time I ride in Huntington Beach on the sidewalk, people think I am a character from Pacific Blue or so. And it was amazing. You pump up the tires, and they were holding air still. And I went, and the grips were all gooey. And I put this bike to use quite a bit, and literally, you know, and it's, these old school geometries had some advantages. There's some old school tricks that are actually easier on that bike than they are on current bikes. So
I saw that video on your YouTube channel, and then you're doing your visual podcasts. Is that an idea that came out of isolation, or is it just good timing that they're starting to happen now?
A bit of both. I remember a few years ago traveling with Rachel Atherton, with Dan Atherton, and they told me always, man, you have so many stories, you should make an audio book, or I would listen to it. And it was always, I kept it in the back of my head. And then I have all these stories. I've done over 40 adventure trips over the years, and I've written often the stories myself, or, you know, and I have the photo materials, and And often there's so many photos from these trips that nobody has ever seen. And I thought it could be a cool thing to reintroduce these adventures and retelling them and adding in some current bits and pieces and information at the same time, and some short video clips. And I literally taught myself how to edit and record, which I always have people doing it usually. And it was about time that I done that. And it's really been fun. And it's like fascinating. And yeah, so I launched this visual podcast series. We call it Hans's Tales of Adventure. And the first one was about my Trans-Angeles adventure. The second one was about Egypt. And also I talked about the mysteries that were going on there with the whole pyramid stuff. I was really into the subject. And when we did the trip 20 years ago, we actually had some pretty cool insider information. And I'm kind of telling this part of the story. And on Saturday, the next one's going to be out about the Tutti Frutti Epic, which is one of these bucket list rides in Livigno, which I'm talking about. And then I'm working on Guatemala right now, and I have plenty to come.
So is there any shortage of photography assets when you're putting these together? I mean, I feel like nowadays all the assets go on the cloud. Like you can kind of have information at your fingertips, but something that you did 20 years ago where like, oh, it's going to be on this thing on OLN and that's going to be it. Are you finding things were well archived for that type of stuff, or is it sort of a hunt?
Stuff is all over the place. I have I'm looking for it and then I find it, and then the next day I'm looking again and I can't find it between the different hard drives and folders, and it's not really labeled. The cool thing is that the more recent adventures in the last 10 or 12 years, you know, not only you have the quality photos from the professional photographers who came along on these trips, you know, be it a Scott Markowitz or a Bill Freeman or a Marcus Graber or whoever, but you have also your iPhone stuff, and that kind of gives a lot of times the insights of, oh, look at this is the meal we ate I'm talking about, and this is the hut we slept in, you know, and so that is kind of cool. I was just explaining to my wife the other day, like one of my classic adventures was back in '99 with PD when we went look for headhunters in Borneo, and it was quite a trippy trip, and we kind of got possessed by spirits and all that. But there's not many photos from that trip, and I literally remember the last time I visited Stefan Eisen, who was the photographer in Munich. He was just like sorting through all his slides he had, and he told me, we don't really need that many of those anymore, right? So he basically threw 90% of the slides away and just kept the money shots. So from that particular trip, I'm probably going to have a shortage of photos because I didn't have a phone, and I'm probably only going to have 20, 25 photos, you know, so that's going to be, I might have to edit in some bits and pieces from the film or so. But it's crazy how many photos we have, and also the quality of a phone. Like we often say that, like, I can make a better film with my iPhone now than we could do with maybe some of the best cameramen in the world 15, 20 years ago, you know, with big professional cameras. It's crazy how technology has evolved.
How do you think our sport is doing at telling and retaining its history? Like, I'm not a football fan, but I have images in my head of football through the decades of when they were wearing leather helmets and like what the aesthetic of the sport was back then. And I just think that there just was deep love for so long that people have retained that. Whereas in mountain biking, things have happened so fast. I mean, do you think there's that there are efforts being made to hold on to things?
Well, I think it could be better. I think the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame is doing a pretty good job, and they kind of reinvented themselves since they moved to Fairfax, California, and they have like made it much more international. They picked up people from all different subcultures, and they also picked up people who have previously been left out and overseen. And I think that Mountain Bike Hall of Fame is the best place we all can go to and kind of find and preserve this information and celebrate it and honor the people who really done a difference, you know, the people who had a ripple effect. And the problem we have with mountain biking, you know, compared to football, what you just said, is mountain biking has so many subcultures.
Mm.
So somebody might be under the umbrella of mountain biking, but he's really only interested in hardtail single speeds, and everything else doesn't matter to him. Or he's only interested in dirt jumping. He doesn't like urban riding or North Shore riding or big mountain riding or enduro or downhill. So you have these interest groups, you know, it's a bit like having the Music Hall of Fame with all these different music styles and artists that are from around the world. It's hard to sometimes get it under one umbrella. That's why there are different Hall of Fames for different sorts of music. But at the same time, I think it's important that we preserve this, and I'm actually quite involved, and I'm quite, you know, I think to have a history is something that makes a sport more legit, and it's also a lot of these people have done pioneer work, and pioneer work is not always easy. You know, the work that some people have done. Like yesterday, I posted something about Al Farrell. He was a Hall of Famer. He died tragically last week, and he was 79 years old. But he was kind of we called him the sugar daddy of mountain biking because he was a wealthy man, but he supported our sport before there was an industry, before there was sponsors, before there was money. And without him, nobody couldn't have put on the first races because he would put up prize money, and he would put up, you know, he would help IMBA to get seeding money so IMBA could get started back in, I think it was the very early 90s when they started. The same with the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame. He gave them seeding money, and he did so many things for our sport that our sport would have never evolved in the same way, in the same speed then, you know. So, and he's a guy most people have never heard of because he's not a famous racer. And there's a lot of other people. I mean, everybody heard of a John Tomac, but there's a lot of people behind the scenes that done stuff for advocacy or in the industry, and they have done groundbreaking work and really pioneered things, you know, and that needs to be recognized.
What about the Wheels for Life, the charity that you and Carmen run? Are they still able to operate right now? Are there any new challenges they're facing?
Yeah, there is challenges, and we're operating, and we actually just funded 500 bikes to healthcare workers in Uganda.
Oh, no.
The whole virus is kind of just now getting going in Africa, and these people are completely unprepared. And in some countries, they have weird laws that you cannot even, I mean, first of all, the healthcare workers don't have cars or transportation. So if they don't have a bike, they often have to walk. And so for us, giving them bikes and giving them mobility makes a huge difference. But also in some cases, we even give away ambulance bikes with trailers so patients can be carried around. And we are funding projects like this. Like so far, you know, our charity, it's really a two-man show. My wife and I, we do most of the work, and we are funding projects, and so far so good.
This was rad. I got a lot of good stuff. Thank you so much for doing this. Stay safe. Hey to Carmen.
Stay safe too. You know, we get through this.
All right. Thanks again.
See you. Bye.